session on business, AQA A-level, 25 marker potential angles for paper 1. Let's go. So the 25 markers in paper 1, well, they're 50% of paper 1. You're going to have to do 2 of these, and each time, and it will be in section C and section D, you will have to choose 1 from 2 of these essays. And if we look at we see that table there across all the units, and it tends to be that the questions are well spread across the specification. So we need to be prepared across everything coming into paper 1. Now, ways to get ready for it, of course you need to practice all those old past paper 25 markers, not necessarily writing them all out, but even if you're just planning them and you're bracing them and you'll think, what are my for, my against, my evaluation points, that's going to help you in prepping for these 25 markers if you have not done that already. But in this video I just want to look at potential new angles, okay? So this is not predictions, revise everything, but I think it's a good thing to just look at new angles where examiners might challenge you from the specification. So the first one is marketing models. Now this has been an examiner favourite in recent years, so let's look at other marketing models that haven't been challenged so far. So elasticity looks big here. We've got PED, price elasticity of demand, and YED, income elasticity of demand. Now if we think about a question revolving around that, here's just a question I've made up. So are PED and YED the most important concepts for marketing decision makers? And you can see I've just put a brace in front here to just sort of feel out how we could perhaps answer this question. So yes, PED is an important concept, perhaps the most important concept for marketing decision makers, because it helps make pricing decisions, of course. If you can estimate your PED, then you can make pricing decisions based off of that. And then in turn you'll know the impacts on your quantity demanded and your revenue. And perhaps you could knock on further and think about how that could impact your stock decisions if you know your quantity demanded. More details on PED, click the card up there. Now YED, well, that helps us understand the likely impact of an economical business cycle on your business and therefore your sales. So you might want to know what your YED is, if you're a luxury good, if you're a necessity good, if you're an inferior good, depends on the nature of your business, of course. Well, knowing your YED will of course be useful. On the other side, things to think about of why PED and YED, so elasticities, might not necessarily be the most important concepts. Well, market research is of course important. Segmentation is of course important. Where you position yourself in the market is important. And how you do your extended marketing mix is of course vital. So they're the things you could think about within this potential question. So the second area we could look at is functional objectives. Again, this has been an examiner favourite in recent years. We've had a finance question, we've had an operations question revolving around the objectives. So if they go that way again, well, HRM is free, marketing is free, they remain due, they haven't been challenged yet. So marketing objectives, you could be thinking sales volume, sales value, market size, market and sales growth, market share, brand loyalty. On the HRM side, you're thinking employee engagement and involvement, talent development, training, alignment of the values and the number, skills and location of employees. So if we were to take marketing here and think about the objectives there, then again, just food for thought. So is market share or brand loyalty more important to a business? On the brand loyalty side, well, maybe that's easier to protect compared to protecting your market share. Perhaps brand loyalty is more stable in economic headwinds. Brand loyalty gives you that inelastic price elasticity of demand, so it gives you the ability to increase your prices. Meanwhile, on the other side, well, market share, that indicates larger volume, then you can get economies of scale, that's what EOS is. Perhaps you could relate that to Porter's 5 forces and think about bargaining power, clearly related to purchasing, economies of scale, and that's going to enable you to get greater profit margins. So that's a potential angle. But the next area to look at is outsourcing and perhaps core competences. So outsourcing, well, it sits quietly at the bottom of Unit 4 in specification, right at the bottom, the value of outsourcing. We could be thinking about that famous quote from C.K. Prahalad. So he's a management guru and he once said, the winners in the global economy will be those companies that can identify their core competencies and outsource everything else. So, perhaps the question could be, should businesses outsource all aspects of their business except for their core competencies? Well, on the yes they should side, perhaps it's more efficient going that way. frees up resources. There's no focus on non-core or non-expertise activities. That could reduce costs, perhaps. And if they're focusing all their expertise on their core competences, well, better products, perhaps, as there's more focus there. On the other side, well, no, it might not be the case, because who are you outsourcing your work to in terms of company or companies? The loss of control in the production process, that might be a problem. IP risks, perhaps. Have you got any patents or copyrights? They might be important within your decision to outsource. Number 4 is budgeting and break-even. This is the next area. Well, both of them have been quiet in the 25 marker arena. If we're thinking about budgeting and break-even, maybe we could be thinking, well, which is more useful for a business? So budgeting, why budgeting is useful to a business? Well, it helps plan for the future, of course. It's useful for businesses on a small budget, because that's why you'd be budgeting. You could go to types of budgeting, perhaps. Perhaps it makes sense in an economic downturn, or if your objective, your business objective that is cost minimisation or survival. Perhaps for better products, as there's more focus there in terms of spending your resources and you're using that expertise. On the break-even side, well, more useful if you're trying to improve your profitability. As break-even, you can look to work that out in terms of your production, your operations, of course, marketing and pricing decisions can be made off of that break-even. Perhaps it's more useful for a business releasing new products because they can project their break-even and, of course, their profits and their loss based on how many they sell. Clearly, with this budgeting and break-even, it's situational, and both are important. Next one we're thinking about is organisational design versus organisational culture. Remember, organisational design, or org design, is in Unit 6, so it's concepts such as delegation, decentralisation, centralisation, and taller structures. And then on Unit 10, so think in Year 2, organisational culture, you might be talking about those handy and Hofstede cultural models. Perhaps a question could be, is organisational design or organisational culture more important? So you're just playing them off against each other. On the org design side, well, perhaps it facilitates flexibility, particularly if you go down that flatter, decentralised, and of course delayering. Maybe improve decision making as a result of that. You could also talk about the virtues of each of them, including centralised structures and decentralised structures, and perhaps the situations where it makes more sense. You could go through particular scenarios, perhaps. On the other side, organisational culture, so improved employee engagement as a result of having a positive, effective organisational culture, perhaps more motivating. Maybe you could relate that to those HRM formulas. You could be thinking about staff turnover, labour productivity, and so forth. And then you could maybe relate it to customer services and the importance of that. Then you'd be thinking about those models, of course, so handy, Hofstede, particularly Hofstede if they're looking for expansion internationally, and you need to consider that countries are different in terms of their culture. So maybe it depends on if the business is an MNC or if it's a small business. Perhaps here a conclusion idea, well, in today's rapidly changing world, organisations need to be able to adapt quickly to new challenges and opportunities. A flexible organisational design will also allow the organisation to respond to change quickly and effectively. So that might be a benefit of being flexible, perhaps on the org design side. Next area to think about is SWOT, being very, very quiet. Perhaps it could be weaved in with planned and emergent strategy, a little bit of a Unit 7, Unit 10 combo. Should SWOT always be used for strategic planning? Well, on the yes side, well, yeah, SWOT should be used. It's planned strategy. You could be thinking about analysing your internal position, those strengths and, of course, weaknesses. Maybe you can capitalise on those strengths, come up with strategies that way. Or on the other side, it's just you're aware of your weaknesses because you did the SWOT and you can mitigate the risk accordingly. On the other side, within SWOT, we're thinking about the external environment and the opportunities and threats, and the fact that you would be planned that and you're aware of those opportunities, you're aware of those threats. And also by doing the SWOT, you can communicate to your stakeholders, maybe your employees, maybe your shareholders, whoever finds that useful. So that's why it could be good to do it for strategic planning. On the other side, well, it's time consuming. Who's doing it? Do you have the expertise? Has every factor been analysed? It's probably difficult to do every single factor. And then I think you're playing it back off against emergent strategies. It's about Mintzberg. The fact that perhaps emergent strategies allows you to be more flexible, and then the benefits of being flexible. Perhaps it makes more sense for small businesses to use emergent strategy. So that's an interesting question that could come up. Area number 7 is internationalisation, so pure Unit 9. We could perhaps mix it in with functional areas and play them off against each other. It could be a compare and contrast question. It could be which functional area is impacted the most by internationalisation. So why it could be marketing, well, you need to adapt your marketing mix, you need cultural awareness. Why it could be operations, well, maybe you need to now use new production processes, different suppliers as a result of internationalisation. Finance, maybe you've got new regulation, new rules you need to be aware of. Of course, exchange rates will be incredibly important. And then on the HRM side, do you have the right people, the right skills in the right place? Is there diversity? Are you able to work effectively with different cultures? So there's an argument for all of those being important. And then in terms of other areas to think about, and just definitely not under-revised, so Bowman, I don't think that's featured. Handy, you could be thinking about recent articles about the fact that the world has obviously moved towards remote working more, and perhaps role culture is more important as a result of that. I've read a few articles about that in papers. Growth and retrenchment, but I don't think that's featured, and mass and niche markets as well, but will be a bit quiet. So hopefully that just gives you an idea of new areas, new angles that could come up. Of course, revise everything, go through those past paper questions, practice them, do your braces, and then maybe work through these questions to just make you feel more confident going into paper 1. I'll see you at the next sesh.